Welcome, everybody. I'm perfectly prepared with some paperwork. I would like to introduce Antonia from Mews, and I think a lot of people already know you, but maybe you can just introduce yourself and especially what Mews is doing.
Hi, Alex, and thanks for inviting me here. It's great to be here. It's actually my first event this year in person, so thanks for the initiative, and love the format already. So I'm Antonia. I'm a sales director at Mews. I've been working for Mews for about 5 years. My background is really hospitality. I've worked in all sorts of segments in hospitality, from branded properties, from Marriott and Radisson. Spent a lot of time in operations, especially. I went into resort hospitality as well, so worked for Sandals in the Caribbean. And in my recent job before Mews, I actually worked in the hosteling industry, which is the exact opposite of, I guess, resort hospitality. Really, really interesting. Worked for Generator Hostels there during a phase where they started rebranding and expanding heavily, so a lot of learnings from there.
Thanks. So now with Mews offering a cloud-based PMS, you're actually the core system within every hotel. What changes do you see were made over the last two and a half years?
You mean system-wise or company-wise?
System-wise and behavioral-wise. You see a lot of changes because everything is built around the PMS.
Absolutely. I think one important change that we've seen over the last few years is that hoteliers critically start rethinking the workflows in their hotels, right? Especially from a staff perspective as well. And I know we tend to talk a lot about the guest journey itself, but equally as important is the staff journey, especially in times of staff shortages. Actually, you hear it everywhere, right? So I think that is one of the critical elements that started changing, and one of the reasons why actually hoteliers are looking at cloud-based tech stacks overall. And I guess another point here would be remote working. You know, that's my favorite topic. I told you that before.
Yes.
I actually had a great chat with quite a few partners here at the event. It's great to see that a lot of concepts have gone towards working from anywhere, really. That sort of concept. It's something that we've been very vocal about, I think, on the Mews channels as well. And me personally, I mean, seeing that even hoteliers can work from anywhere these days, right? Enjoying some time in the Canary Islands or wherever else. It's just great to see that change.
How does the remote working or the remote first concept actually helps the hotelier? And maybe also, where do you see the benefit for the customer from a hotel point of view?
Absolutely. I think from a hotelier's perspective, I understand that you might be limited to certain departments working from anywhere. I understand that operations might not necessarily be the number one department that can just work from anywhere, but I guess if you're a larger chain as well, you can do that sort of cross exposure as well between different locations as well. But I guess the main aim here being that, you know, staff is generally happier, I guess. Change of scenery. I just myself did that last week. I decided to work from Barcelona. We don't have an office there, right? I went into a co-working space and I made so many great connections. And it kind of puts you into a complete different atmosphere where you start rethinking your daily work, the approach you're taking with certain people, and it just gives you the space to think freer.
So technology is key for working remote, but how do hoteliers can empower their members of staff to make use of this remote work?
That's a good question. I think, first of all, it's really important that you obviously operate over cloud tech stack, right? That makes you more flexible to really work from anywhere, right? You don't have these traditional dependencies on server, VPN, whatsoever else, right? So that's the first step there. Remote working, again, it can encompass any sort of department in a sense of sales, marketing, events, and I've seen a lot of hoteliers actually boasting about it as well on LinkedIn, that they're able to do that with the systems that they have in place. So that's absolutely great to see. So I guess, how do you encourage them to do that is really, it's everyone to their own, right? There's people that like to work from an office, that like to have the team environment, the office environment, but really giving them the flexibility to say, hey, it's okay if you, I don't know, spend a weekend away with friends and you might want to work from the office there for 1 or 2 days, right? I'm not saying do it all the time. Mm-hmm. All I'm saying is give your team the flexibility to think about would they be happier if they had the flexibility to work that way?
So what do you think about working cross-functional? A lot of people or a lot of hotels currently suffer from staff shortage. They try to involve new ways of working. What's your point of view, and what's your opinion on cross-functional working and cross-functional teams?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because we all know there's a saying, teamwork makes the dream work, right? And it's absolutely true when it comes to hospitality, when it comes to tech companies, whatsoever else. I just think it brings the best out of people. And again, there's an idea exchange through different lenses, right? For instance, I think a really good example to use here, what we've done at Mews is, obviously we're quite an agile company, right? And we have to build roadmaps. It's always a very exciting time, right? And traditionally, in traditional companies, you build roadmaps by just having product managers and technology or developers speak to each other, right? And that's about it. We're going about it differently. We set up a cross-functional team, which is called the Product Council. So the Product Council has a representative from every single department. So let it be sales, let it be customer success, let it be support team as well, that can be the voice of that department. And when we go into discovery for certain roadmap planning, for example, then all of these departments will be around and will be consulted on what they believe should be priority for that particular quarter that we're planning it for. And that's a really good example to use also when you then translate this into hospitality, right? Whatever it is that you might want to change, right? Set yourself some objectives for it. Form a project team really that encompasses so many skill sets and expertises. And again, I'm not just saying take the department head, right? That would be the most logical thing to do first, but take people that are in the front line, right? That might be keen on, they have some sort of interest in website building, knowledge in technologies in any sort of way, right? Anything that they might be interested in, really. Put them together into a group, give them objectives, right? Transparently, obviously. And really let them work through that project from all of these different lenses, and I promise you it will be a much more successful project.
Which should be the key, or should be the target. So a couple of years ago, usually when you decide for a different project or for application, the general manager or the owner of the hotel decides which product we would like to realize. Now you're speaking about involve your team, make your team part of this decision process. How do you measure the success? Is it only that we do have a new system, but how do you see the success of a new tech stack or of a new application from the vendor point of view?
Absolutely. So there's obviously, it's really important, as with anything, that you set yourself some clear objectives. We call them OKRs, so objectives and key results, right? That really translate down to what it is you're trying to achieve. Let's just say, what did I have the other day? Oh yeah, I had a hotelier who came to me and said, we have a new system that we implemented. We have less occupancy, right? But somehow my queue at the reception is longer and my check-in times are longer, right? So he's already identified some key metrics that he's looking at that he is very clear about. He wants to reduce, for example, the check-in time, right? Or the waiting time by the reception. Or let it be, I guess, the amount of manual payments that are being made and how long they take, right? Like it can be any sort of metric. Look at your guest journey, look at your staff journey really, and then look into the metrics that you're trying to solve, right? But first and foremost, speak to your teams and see what they think needs to be improved on the guest journey side and on the staff journey side to make their lives easier, to really let them be the host as well. And I promise you, in every department, there will be topics coming up, there will be metrics created, and be very transparent about it, right? Like the minute you give individuals the freedom to speak, they will speak up. Obviously, it's all based on a culture as well, right? Like the cultural background is really important to foster that culture of, I do want to make a change, right? That comes from the top, but also comes from the bottom at the same time, you know? And it needs to be a leadership in that sort of environment that encourages that as well. Really, really important. But I think a really good starting point there is just to identify what's not going so well and where do we want to work to. And that can be very, very simple metrics like, we're not turning over rooms in housekeeping fast enough, right? Like our guests are waiting too long for their rooms, or all of the rooms are only being cleaned at like 4 p.m. There's clearly something wrong, right? So yeah, it's as simple as that.
Talking about new metrics, what do you think next to those standard metrics about budget, occupancy, ADR, what do you think will change or already have changed in terms of metrics which are important to my hotel business?
Yeah, I actually have a funny background story there. So I actually wrote my bachelor thesis based on KPIs in the hospitality industry for small and medium hotels. And I went back at that the other day, and I figured, man, we're still using the same KPIs from like 20 years ago, approximately, you know? So it's time to change. And I think there is definitely a sort of mindset change, which is based on the way, or the change in the way a guest travels, right? Also requires you or us hoteliers here to really shift the metrics that we're looking at. So yeah, traditionally we're looking at ADR, we're looking at RevPAR, right? We're looking at occupancy. But what we want to, as Mews, really pay the focus on in the coming years is more like total revenue, right? We have several outlets here. Actually, the student hotel is a perfect example of that, right? We have the bar, we have the restaurant, we have the gym, we have the barber shop, right? We have the co-working spaces, parking maybe even, and so forth, right? So at the end of the day, for me, it's really important not to just look at a one dimension, which is just the room, right? Because that's really controlled by revenue. Actually, I need to look at all of my revenue streams that I'm bringing in, and really from there figure out how can I optimize any of these parts along the guest journey.
And where do you see the biggest challenges for hotels changing the way to look at those metrics?
Absolutely. I think we as an industry haven't really, in terms of systems as well, we haven't made it so easy yet for hoteliers to put these systems, these metrics down. Let's talk, for example, about loyalty. Loyalty is really, really one of my favorite topics as well. And I know Niels just spoke a little bit about, you know, it's not the point system that's going to work these days. But loyalty is a big part for me, where I'm more interested in, or like what a hotelier should be more interested in, is calculating a customer lifetime value, right? Really understanding, and what that basically translates down to is revenue per available guest times the number of nights times the number of visits, right? That's my figure. Now, is there any native system out there that just makes it possible like that to calculate all of that across all of the outlets? And that's something that we at Mews are intensely looking at the moment, because that's ultimately the metric we should be working off, right? Because if I know that Alex stays with me in Berlin, Barcelona, and London, and spends heavily by the bar because he likes his beers, right, at check-in.
Maybe gin and tonic.
Most likely, I can just forecast a lot better, right? And I can cater and upsell to him a lot better as well. And again, at the end of the day, we're all trying to make a profit here, right? And that will also convince investors a lot more, right? If we're looking at the total metric.
A lot of hotels, from my point of view, actually suffer from missing interfaces and missing connections. How do you encourage the hotels and maybe other partners of the tech stack to really work on a combined point of view? Because you, from the PMS point of view, are looking at one metric. How can you combine this with, for example, with the customer journey, or how can you combine it with the point of sale system?
It's really, I think, it's really down to the bigger vision that's behind it, right? Like quite a lot of things. I mean, when Mews started, we had maybe, I don't know, 3-4 interfaces at the time, and now we have a marketplace of 600 plus interfaces. And again, we're going deeper into these every single day. So I think it's really about aligning the vision, right? So there's a hotelier who says, hey, I have an idea of what would be the ideal workflow, but I need XYZ system to pull together. And then it's really about discussing it in a team. Hey, that's a vision that I love a topic about attribute-based pricing, for example. We had that recently, I think, with several systems. And it's really something, yes, we do believe in it, right? It's just really finding the right partners that also have the same vision, that are excited about these sort of functionalities and not just functionality, but solutions and better guest experiences that we're creating. So exactly, find the ones that have the right vision, right? Present your ideas to them. And again, the worst thing you can hear is a no, not right now, and then you move on to a next partner. There will be somebody, right, that will listen to you and work on that workflow with you.
So when a hotel comes to you and asks you, okay, where should I start? What would be your answer? Okay, obviously start with a PMS, but how do I start with this process to iterate, to introduce new metrics and also to introduce new ways of collaborative working?
Yeah. I have a really good example here, which I think, especially during the pandemic, right? This was quite challenging, knowing that teams couldn't meet up together as much anymore, right? So actually, I have a really good customer story from the Mercure Hotel Moa here in Berlin as well. I'm not sure if somebody's around from them. But basically what they have done is they looked at, first of all, they looked at the guest journey, right? They knew they needed to improve some of the workflows, too much manual stuff. They identified certain metrics like too many queues at reception, or check-in time is too long, and so forth, any of these, in a team. So they, again, went back to that cross-functional setup. They went into the team and they said, hey, what is it that you'd like to improve? Put it down, right? Map out your guest journey. Make it very visual, right? If you need to use a whiteboard or whatever it is, just use it, draw something, brainstorm, right? And line up your actual guest journey, what would be ideal. Line up your ideal employee journey as well to say, hey, in this part of the guest journey, this is what is expected from the receptionist, that's expected from housekeeping, that's expected from there. And then line up the technology that can help you with that. Now, that said, you will have to do a lot of researching, definitely, right? There's so many systems out there that can probably help you, but I guess starting with a PMS system that's well connected is always a good idea, because they can kind of create that tech stack with you, because they have the experience, right? They speak to integration partners all the time, and I think Apaleo said that nicely earlier as well. It's just really building it together yourself and being in charge of your own tech stack is no longer left to just an IT person, right?
Coming back to cross-functional teams, now with this shortage on staff, how can the working with the cross-functional team help me to train members of staff which maybe are not coming from the hospitality itself, but are now coming from a different industry? How can working cross-functional help me aligning those members of staff?
Absolutely. First of all, I guess if you select a new tech stack, make sure that it's easy to learn, right? Most SaaS systems out there, they pride themselves on an easy user interface, easy UX, but also learning portals, learning platforms that they back themselves up with, right? So learning by doing, learning via online universities basically are the basic principles of modern technology actually. And then really have one project manager in charge, right? Who's kind of the system expert, who's kind of, I guess your central point that you can ask, or you could even go that deep and have departmental experts as well, right? You can go into that level as well. That said, we do follow the trainer approach in most technologies here, as far as I know from any of our marketplace partners as well. So in that sense is, if you onboard one property, for example, and you've gone through an onboarding process or a change process, generally speaking, right, you'll be able to replicate this easily across multiple sites, right? As long as you have a central, I guess, person or team that knows exactly how that's supposed to happen and how to take people with them, because I think the hardest element in all of that is motivating people to actually do this with you, because for a lot of departments it might just look like, oh, it's another system, right? But really making them part of that journey and being transparent. And that's why I come back to the Mercure Moa again. And what they've done is they've actually prepared a lot of online videos for their departments. They let their department heads really pitch the new workflows to their teams as well and ask for feedback on it as well. So they went into testing phases even with a new tech stack, and I highly encourage anyone to do that, make them part even, and if it's just merchandise from your tech partners, right? Like sometimes it's as simple as this, and that can really make a big difference. Really, like creating a community is I guess what I'm trying to say at the end of the day.
So if you want to give an outlook into the future, what do you think are the 2 or 3 most important trends coming up in the hospitality overall, and especially when it comes to tech stack?
So I think one of the first ones, and I think Niels has slightly mentioned it already, is really the rise of the digital nomad leads us to rethink loyalty, right? I think it's an important part. A lot of chains are talking about loyalty and rethinking loyalty at the moment. And again, going away from the typical points-based system, we've seen new concepts coming up. So really the subscription-based memberships is something that we're looking at in terms of loyalty as well. Think of the likes, I think the first one that came up with it were Citizen M. And they created this basically 2 concepts. One was more corporate, the other one was more targeted at long stay guests. And really, I mean, what they're ultimately, because loyalty is a returning customer that uses all of your outlets and services in an ideal way. And making that guest come back, right? That's loyalty. And I think subscription memberships like that are an ideal way to cater to, I guess, the modern traveler who, you know, might work in Barcelona, then jump onto London, might not even have a flat anymore or an apartment, right? They might just live out of a Citizen M or a student hotel or whatever else it is, right? So I think loyalty is a big part of the discussions that we're having internally as well this year, and I see a lot of changes coming up there. It's not your typical discounts anymore, basically, that you go in with. It's more the total picture and the experience behind it. And then I think a second part is really data and silos. And we talked about metrics a lot already, right? But every time we're going into projects with companies, with hospitality businesses, the first thing we already identify is there are several data silos, right? And that's hard to maintain in this modern world. And it basically, if you have an infrastructure like that, how are you going to create metrics like that? How are you going to create your daily data reporting and really work through that as well and live that, right? So I think the first thing is, and that will come up more and more in the coming years, is removing the different data silos and really working from one centralized point of view to enable, I guess, better decision making, generally speaking, and faster decision making as well. As you can see, the world changes quite rapidly, and fast decisions are key these days. You got to be the first one to make things happen, and I think, yeah, that's really one of the key points we're focusing on this year as well.
From a customer point of view, how do you think, or do you think the ultimate tech stack will actually influence the customer to book with you? So does the customer care about which technology is actually working inside the hotel? Does the customer or the guest really acknowledge what's happening on the tech stack side inside the hotel? Or is it more about just experience a seamless customer journey independently from the systems?
I do believe that the guest truly does not care what technology is right there. Or what brand is behind the technology. That's what I wanted to say. I do believe that certain travelers, and again, that's where we need to segment again, millennials, Gen Z, right? Let's talk about that, are much more tech savvy these days, right? So they expect to be arriving without having to queue at reception, right? They might want to use a self-checking kiosk like the student hotel does, right? They might want to pay with Apple Pay. And they might want to, not bother with anything else, or just maybe go to the bar, charge everything to their room, and that's about it, right? Might want to use a co-working space for 2 hours. So long story short, I don't think that they particularly care what technology is behind it, but they obviously want to live their lifestyle, and they choose certain hospitality businesses based on their lifestyle, and that comes with certain technology enablement for sure. But in terms of brand or what exactly is being offered, I don't think they care too much, as long as they can, maybe plug in their Netflix subscription to their TV, I guess make use of their way of payment and so forth. I don't think it's particularly necessary to talk about a specific brand behind it.
Not about the brands, but about the systems which are in use. So more or less coming to an end. Thank you. Last 3 words. How would you, what you would expect from this year in terms of hotel tech, and especially from the hotels? What are your 3 wishes for the upcoming year?
I think my 3 wishes for, especially the hoteliers, are that, we're seeing 2019 levels of occupancy again. I'm hoping that, there's lots of new, concepts coming up as well, right? We see so many experience hotels, boutique hotels, so many innovative concepts that just have a slight different touch and target quite different niche markets as well in terms of customers. So I'm hoping to see a lot more exciting stuff like that. And I'm also really hoping that people will actually make use of any of the recommendations here on stage today as well, right? Like, for example, go away from your points-based system, for example, and really look into what loyalty means for your brand, right? Really start rethinking and really just, final wish, just start rethinking your processes and make it easier for your staff especially, to just create remarkable guest experiences that are focused on the guest rather than on some weird workflow. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Antonia.
Thanks so much.
I wish you a great day. And